Welcome back to Faith, Frauds, and Falsehoods, where we explore the cults and religions of the world. Tonight, we're starting our discussion on NXIVM. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to help others to find us.
Now, before we begin, let's make it clear. The opinions that we present are ours alone. They do not represent the views or opinions of our respective churches or employers. Brian, let's begin.
All right, Matt, what have you drugged me into?
Oh, we are going to talk about NXIVM.
Yeah.
Let's start with the spelling of NXIVM. NXIVM.
Yep.
This is a group ran by Keith Raniere. NXIVM is actually considered a cult, but was originally formed as a company. So they did not claim to be a religion per se.
Right.
Which is different than some of the others we've covered. This is not necessarily a religion based on Christianity. Again, different than some of the others we've covered.
Right.
Actually quite, anti any religion almost. Yeah. They brought in people from Christianity, from quite a few Jewish people, and for some Buddhists and some different people into this. It was actually a multi-level marketing company.
Right.
And I'm sure our viewers know how much I love multi-level marketing.
I don't, some of our viewers will know that, but Matt, we have grown quite a bit. So
this is true.
This could be the first time
they're multi-level marketing, pyramid schemes. I don't care if it's legal by the letter of the law. It is immoral. And let me just say this very controversial opinion of mine. If you are involved in multi-level marketing, it is immoral and you should stop. You should stop now. I'm not interested. Nobody's interested. I don't want to be your friend. I don't care if we went to high school together. Okay. And I'm not a boss babe.
Right.
Oh, and you don't own your own business.
Right.
You are working for a multi-level marketing company. They are taking advantage of you and making you a consultant and not an employee and making you pay to sell their product. And you do not own your own business. You are not a business owner. I have been and am currently a business owner.
Yep.
You are not. If you run if you're doing multi-level marketing. Now, former President Donald Trump says one of the best training that anybody can do to run a business is to get involved in multi-level marketing. That should be all you need to know right there why you shouldn't get involved in multi-level marketing.
Oh, Matt, you're going to get us into trouble.
I hope we get some comments on it because people need to know. Okay?
You're right. Absolutely.
This is immoral. It is wrong. I don't care what belief system you have. It is wrong.
Yep.
But beyond that, let's start with NXIVM. NXIVM was a multi-level marketing,
NXIVM.
but was actually way beyond. This was not no doTERRA essential oils here.
Right.
This was something entirely different.
Yep. So Keith Raniere founded NXIVM with Nancy Salzman in 1991.
Well,
so the company
I think they founded it a little later, actually. I know we wrote down both dates there. But
yeah.
It's because what happened was
probably mistyped that.
Well, there was some confusion in what companies he had.
True.
Right?
True.
So let's start at the first part there. We talked about he was born in Brooklyn in 1960. So he's from New York.
Yep.
Lived in New York most of his life.
Super intelligent, according to people that knew him growing up. Very bright kid.
He was told that he was more intelligent than other people. And he seemed to just run with that, especially in his young adolescence.
Right.
Seemed to just like that switch flipped.
Yeah.
Right?
At some point, if I remember right, it might have been his dad in an interview was talking about how, at some point in his childhood, he went from being just a really smart kid to being Jesus. Just kind of had this superiority, I'm better than you complex, right, in his life.
Took Sheldon Cooper to an extreme here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And became very manipulative, right? And very early on started manipulating people to get his way. Well,
and when he was a teenager, if you're a teenage boy and you can manipulate people, what's the first thing you're going to manipulate? Girls. Yep. And that's exactly what he did. And he kind of kept up on that. He was also successful early on. He got involved in Amway a little bit, learned about that, Amway was kind of on the downside at that point. I think Amway probably still exists, but it's not as popular as it once was.
Yeah.
In 1990, he founded his own multi-level marketing company called Consumers Byline. I think I've heard of this. I'm not entirely sure. My dad didn't get involved in that at some point.
I could see that.
Yeah,
just the way that you've talked about your dad, I could see that.
Oh yeah. My dad could sell ice to an Eskimo, which I just realized is probably I probably shouldn't have said that. That's probably disparaging to Eskimos. But my point is, my dad could sell anything to anybody. I don't mean to insult an Eskimo,
right?
But
Consumers Byline.
Consumers Byline. So he formed a multi-level marketing company. He made some mistakes. And the government pounced, and it was an illegal pyramid scheme.
Yep. Yeah, because if it's not set up precisely according to the law, they'll get you.
So the difference between a pyramid scheme and multi-level marketing is very, very thin. And the government will get you on that. And in the case of Amway, it has a lot to do with whether or not you have people in power who are involved in your company. There's a lot of influence and corruption involved in that as well. We should definitely do an episode on multi-level marketing. Because I've done a lot of studying on multi-level marketing in the past, and there is a whole history there. And I could talk you into the airplane and then joining on my airplane and going on a ride with me. But we'd all
maybe we'll do that
crash.
As a special. We'll do that as a special since there's not
could
a lot
be
of
a great special.
theology.
We were talking about doing some live specials. There's not a lot of theology, but there's definitely some psychology involved in multi-level marketing. And let's talk about that for a second. So he started off in multi-level marketing. He learned about Amway, was involved a little bit in that, not as an owner or anything. Then he founded his own company and was very successful with it for a short period of time until they were closed down.
Made a whole bunch of money.
Yes. And let's talk about that. There's some psychology involved in that, and it's about this controlling other people. He liked to work with other people who were successful, but yet could be manipulated.
Right.
He liked to work with other people who wanted more. Do you know who the average target of a multi-level marketing company is for a recruit? What would you think demographically they would look like?
Given all of the people that I know involved in multi-level marketing, it'd be like 20s, 30s housewives.
You would think.
I'm sure that's not the main target. Yeah.
That's not the main target. That's the target we think.
Right.
And it's going to freak you out on why it's you and me. It's actually, it does lean heavily female, but it's male and female, but it leans heavily female. They actually want people who already have some success.
Right.
Already have success in career, some success. Okay. They want people who already have some success in making money, but know they need to make more money. Right. And know that it's possible. And they already know the secret is you can go work and make more money. The American dream. Look, I mean, you've lived this American dream. It's quite possible, right? How many times have you talked about different business ideas that if we didn't follow our legal and ethical moral thing, we couldn't do? Yep. We could do if we didn't follow those things, right?
Yep.
Well, the MLM, it buys into that greed a little bit.
Right.
And they try to sell you a dream of even better, and they try to not get around the greed thing. They're playing on the greed a little bit. Hey, you can make a lot of money, but also you're helping other people make money. And look, how many times have I told you the key to success is to make other people successful?
Yep.
I learned that from Zig Ziglar years ago, and that's helped me very much in my career. So all that feeds in the MLM thing, but we're on NXIVM, not just MLMs, but they mix in so much because this was an MLM company. Yeah. So he had Consumers Byline, and then that got crunched by the government. He created another company that sold vitamins. We didn't write down the name of it, and I didn't look it up, but selling vitamins because that's a very common thing. And eventually settled out, and then he created a new company, being much more careful to sell a particular product. This is whenever he got with Nancy Salzman, who was a psychologist, and he created NXIVM. Right. NXIVM didn't sell a particular product; they sold training.
Right.
Nancy Salzman was a little older than him. She was born in 1954 in New Jersey.
Yeah, and she's hard to find a lot about. even looking back at the NXIVM websites from 20 years ago, which is crazy to think about, but
right.
Looking back at that, I mean, her biography on the page is very, very limited, and it's mostly just her professional skills and things that she's done, like studying in healthcare, research into human potential, human empowerment, but not a lot of biographical history, not a lot of, I mean,
she
like
was
her
number
alma mater's not listed. There's nothing.
She was number 2.
Mm-hmm.
She was definitely one of his lovers. You'll find pretty much everybody in this is one of his lovers.
Yep.
Later, her daughter was also one of his lovers. Lauren Salzman, who was also involved. We'll get to her. So it was intentional that she wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she was hyped up inside the company because she did a lot of the training herself.
Yep. Yeah, she was in
and
charge.
She was considered the expert.
Yep, she was in charge of planning out how all of the training would work to match up with his tool set, right?
And this training was, they started with this executive success program.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think that you started with that. That was one of the big things was, basically how to be successful. And they taught some useful things. Just like we talked in Scientology. They taught things that taught people how to communicate better.
Mm-hmm.
Right? As a matter of fact, they taught some of the exact same things from Scientology.
Yeah.
But as part of that, they also mixed in stuff like standing up and thanking the picture of Vanguard in the room. Vanguard is Keith Raniere, by the way.
Yep.
He went by the name of Vanguard inside the organization.
Yep.
So while this was a executive success program and a training program, we've all been to some training things like this before.
Mm-hmm.
This was weird. This was you would stand up and you thank the picture on the wall. Where else have we heard that people stand up and go hip hip hooray, hip hip hooray, hip hip hooray every day?
Mm-hmm.
That was in Scientology.
Yep.
So again, stole some stuff there. And I know we're going to go over some of that in theology here, but that's part of it. The other part of it was being uncomfortable. They taught the people to be uncomfortable. And again, that pulls from Scientology and from other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
As we talked about Scientology, a lot of it wasn't original either.
Right.
But the people who took this stuff were taught as part of the lessons how smart Keith Raniere was. They were told that he was the smartest man in the world. Which, by the way, he's in the Guinness Book of World Records as the smartest man in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy for them to prove that. Now, there's some controversy on that. He took an IQ test that you could take home and take.
Right.
And I thought Guinness was a little more particular about that. But they're not about every record. They take a lot of just submissions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not a super authoritarian thing, actually.
Right.
So there's some controversy on that. But the big thing, I noticed you made a note here about Nancy Salzman. Her big thing was she was able to take this stuff that Keith Raniere was teaching and make it reproducible.
Yep. That was the big thing.
I know she gets the credit for that, but let's remember that he was involved in MLM before.
Oh yeah.
He is not, he was a guru type, but he really wasn't trying to play the guru as much as he was trying to make the money.
Right.
All this was expensive. So to get involved in this cost a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
There was no free options. There was no cheap options. It cost a lot of money. Again, just like Scientology, you can't get involved unless you're going to spend a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So this brought in followers who would spend a lot of money. Now, a lot of people would go take his first class, which was $5,000. It was the 5-day. Yeah. So $5,000, $2,500. It's one of those two.
Either way, it's a lot of money.
Yeah. It was the 5-day, and a lot of people would never go past that 5-day class. But then the more dedicated would take the next one, which would be the 16-day, and et cetera. So this was kind of what the organization was.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit more about their history. So they formed in the 90s, right?
Uh-huh. 98 was when Executive Success Programs officially formed. NXIVM, I think, started in 97. Right? Because, again, this was a company, right?
Well, NXIVM had several different things, executive success programs, and they had all these different, they're always coming out with new training and new stuff.
Right.
They later came out with groups for the guys, groups for the women. Mm-hmm. The group for the women was called Guinness. Right. And the group for the guys, I forget the name of it. We'll cover that when we go into their
all the social issues.
thing.
Yep.
And then DOS, which we'll get to here in just a minute. So let's jump on up to 2012.
Yeah.
By 2012, he has really built this organization up.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, he has his offices in Albany, in New York. And by the way, most of the people who work for the company live with him. And those that don't...
Like in the same city or in the same house?
Same house. In the same house.
All right. Mm-hmm.
If they're female and single, they live with him in his townhouse.
Okay.
If they're more wealthy, they might live in their own house, but very near him. They all lived in the same neighborhood. Keith Raniere actually didn't keep regular office hours. He often would, he had a farm that he would go out to and he'd play volleyball. And the way they would communicate with him was go out and play volleyball with Keith at night. Or they go on long walks with Keith. Things like that.
Yeah.
But a lot of them lived with him. So he was having sexual relationships with lots of different women at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them knew about it, but not necessarily all of them. As he would bring people in. Let's talk about a few of those. So in 2012, he started to get some publicity.
Right.
The Albany Times-Union runs a story of women who said that he tricked them into sex, underage sex, etc. So but this story came out, and I'm going to tell you all about this story here in a minute.
Yeah.
But I got to start off telling you, it was mostly ignored by the authorities. Nothing really much happened by this, and we're going to talk about that because I mentioned underage, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, him messing with little girls. His followers at the time were told to ignore this. People who took his classes and stuff and would ask, what is this story about Keith? Ignore that. Those are suppressives. Mm-hmm. One of the things they learn about in the 5 days is suppressives, people who won't take the teachings. Haven't we heard this before, but it was called suppressive persons?
Yep, we've heard suppressive persons before.
And the same thing, they're supposed to completely disassociate with suppressives. So when somebody crosses Keith and they're out, then they're out.
Right.
So let's talk about the first one. This is the worst. Well, I don't know if you want to rate them in worst, but let's talk about the first one. They're all bad.
Yeah.
It was reported that he had a long-term sexual relationship with a 12-year-old daughter of one of his employees at Consumers Byline. This was even before NXIVM came about. She later became an employee at NXIVM.
Okay.
Yeah, but she later became an employee at NXIVM too. She stayed with him. Several people stayed with him through the change of companies. This girl reported it to the police in 1993. She was not 12 then. It wasn't clear exactly how old she was then. I think 16, 17.
Okay.
She reported to police in 1993. However, since she refused to wear a wire and tried to get him to incriminate himself on tape, it was never taken to the prosecutor. The police took her report, but they never turned it over to the prosecutor because it was going to be a he said, she said thing.
Yep.
And basically, they just weren't going to believe a little girl. Now, y'all, this is the early 90s, which is not that long ago. Right. This was normal police work back then.
Yep.
You know, I realize we live in a post-Me Too movement world now where things are a little different. But just like a lot of things, just like civil rights, or people like, oh, things are so much different now. Yes, they are. Thank the Lord for that. But they're still not great. There's still 12-year-old girls getting raped that get ignored. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's exactly what happened to this little girl. Okay. Because she wouldn't wear a wire and go back to him to get abused further.
Right.
Basically, they wouldn't take it to the prosecutor, so they were going to do anything about it. They even went so far to make her sign a statement incriminating herself, basically saying that she willingly did it and that she didn't wish to pursue the matter any further and prosecute him. He had nothing to do with this. This was not a crime committed on her. This part wasn't by Keith Raniere. This was by the police.
Right.
I guess it wasn't technically a crime, but they made her sign this. And you can go find that online, by the way. We'll link to it about the police report. Notice I did not name who she was.
Right.
It's that whole name in a minor thing, but also some of these people have identified themselves. She has not been identified publicly. I think if you dig, you could find it, but we intentionally left that name out because it was not in the news reports at all.
Right.
Later, he had, actually this was technically earlier. It was reported, but it was reported later in the same news story. that he had a sexual relationship with two different 15-year-old girls, a girl and her cousin, in 1984. One of them, he had a relationship with a girl, and then he met her cousin, and then he had a relationship with that girl. Now, this is whenever he was in his 20s. Okay, so he was definitely not a minor and not close to it in 1984. Right. What was he born again?
60.
60?
Yep.
So that'd make him 24?
Mm-hmm.
And he had a relationship with a 15-year-old girl. He was caught crawling out of her window. Her sister caught her. And the parents knew about it and kind of just allowed it to happen. Not because they were some follower of his, but they thought he was so smart and he was going to marry their daughter. And, of course, he never married her.
Yep.
One of the sisters, he told her that she was a Buddhist goddess and she was meant to be with him. She later, we have not heard from her because she later killed herself. She went to a Buddhist temple and killed herself.
Mm.
So it's assumed he had something to do with that, but nobody has any proof or evidence of that.
Yeah.
Another woman that came forward was Svetlana Kotlin. Svetlana. She ran a physical therapy business next to the NXIVM offices, which was kind of an office park type thing.
Okay.
And she was told she had a relationship with him, a sexual relationship with him. He sweet talked her into it and everything. And she was told that if she broke up with him, it would kill him. So some of his other women in his harem would come to her and say, if you break it up with Keith, it'll hurt him. You'll kill Keith. And remember, they're being taught how he's just the smartest man in the world, you know?
Right.
Barbara Boucher, who we'll come back into more about this during the social episode, she was very involved in the company, very influential in recruiting and such. She is the one who actually came forward about this and brought these other women forward to the newspaper. They did a lot of investigative journalism. Barbara Boucher really kind of blew the lid off of this. And unfortunately, not much happened because of it. Christine Marie. Now, this woman is very interesting because she ties into some other cults we've talked about. I don't know if you had a chance to look over my notes on this. Have you?
I looked through it a bit.
So she was Miss Michigan in 1995. She was formerly a Methodist and she converted to Mormonism. Then she got divorced and was kicked out of the LDS church because she was dating after her divorce. Somehow she found out about NXIVM and she moved to Albany to work for Keith in 1998. She actually moved there with her kids. Keith had told her that if they had sex, she would see a blue light. And she says she did. Now, she now chalks that up to the power of suggestion. You've heard of that power suggestion thing before?
Yep.
But she left. That was in 98. In 2000, she left and moved back to Utah to be with a Mormon cult leader. He made her do tests to prove she was celestial. And he made her basically prostitute herself out to other people and things like that. And then later it was told to her that, all this was just a joke. He was just playing. Or not a joke, but it was all fake.
Right.
So basically he was her pimp. Very interestingly, he's never named. They call him Adam, and it's a fake name.
Yeah.
I don't understand why he's never named, and I'm going to get more into this story just a little bit. We won't get too off topic.
Right.
While she was there and she tried to get away from this guy, she called Keith to help her. And he came and helped her. He did help her get out of that situation.
Okay.
But he tried to get her to come back to NXIVM, and she refused to go back because she wanted to stay with her kids. And he wanted to come back without the kids. And she felt like she needed to be there for her kids. And as far as I know, she's still an LDS member.
Okay. But
she now, go ahead.
I was going to say, you have a note here that she works with a group. Called Voices with Dignity.
Yes.
And they're helping FLDS members to keep their homes?
Yes. So remember when we covered FLDS, we talked about the community of Short Creek, which was two different cities, right? Colorado City and I forget the name of the other one.
Yeah.
The community of Short Creek. Well, that almost everything in Short Creek was owned by the UEP, the United Effort Program. But the FLDS controlled the UEP, and the government seized the UEP and thus seized all their property. But the government is not necessarily trying to take the homes away from the individual people. They took it away from the cult leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now the government put new leadership in the UEP who are not FLDS, but are often related or former FLDS, and have been working with the FLDS people who lived in those houses to let them stay. But they're requiring them to do things like pay $100 a month for the membership fee and pay the taxes, sometimes thousands of back taxes and things.
Yeah.
And there's some stuff of whether or not they do or don't cooperate with the government. Some of the people who gotten into the houses are FLDS. Some are former FLDS.
Mm-hmm.
As we know, as we talked about, that whole group fractured. So there's multiple leaders now. It's been a mess. One of the groups that has come in and helped is the Voices with Dignity. In a lot of cases, the FLDS members that are currently FLDS won't deal with UEP people because they consider them apostate. But they will deal with Voices of Dignity and help them kind of negotiate something. They won't even make official agreements, but the Voice of Dignity kind of helps work out things.
Okay, cool.
She is one of the leaders of the Voices with Dignity. She helps people get out of those situations like she's been in the past, and she's definitely become a somebody to be admired for that. I do think that begs the question, was that cult leader she was involved with that it says was a Mormon cult leader, was that FLDS? Was that Warren Jeffs?
Was that Warren Jeffs?
Wouldn't be outside of his ways, for sure. And we know he dallied with a lot of things that he never got caught on.
Uh-huh.
So,
and now that she's trying to help the FLDS basically get out from under the FLDS, the UEP, maybe.
Right. So, yeah. So anyways, that was Christine Marie.
Mm-hmm.
Another one was Tony Natalie. Now, she's very outspoken. She says she's his former girlfriend. A lot of these people were his girlfriend at the same time. She brought in to Consumers Byline, and he talked her into leaving her husband and moving with her son to Albany. He talked a lot of women into leaving their families and moving to Albany.
Be with him. Yep.
He had very few male followers. He did have some, though. There was some male followers. After 6 years, she left him, and he sent her a timeline of her demise. He wrote her a letter and sent her a timeline of her demise, of how her end would be. And he also sent other women out, just like he did previously, to tell her that, look, her leaving him was killing him. She's very outspoken and has been outspoken. There were lawsuits. Most people who have ever left him, he's filed lawsuits against.
Right.
And won some. He'll definitely hound them using the legal means or whatever means he can. Again, this harkens back to Scientology right here, doesn't it?
Yep.
So that was the NXIVM. I've heard the term NXIVM 9. I don't know if y'all noticed I only said 7 people, so I'm not exactly sure where the 9 comes from. But Sarah Edmondson refers to them as the NXIVM 9, so I'm not sure where the numbers are different. But that was in 2012. So all that stuff came out in this news story, and nothing really happened. He just kept on going.
Mm-hmm.
As we've seen, the police didn't pursue about the underage girl. Most of the other women were of age, and even for their things, and just nothing really happened.
Yep.
So he kept going, and he kept going.
Right.
Now, at this point, he's had probably hundreds of women that he's been in sexual relationships with, over and off and on and different things.
Yeah.
Constantly, multiple, and all this stuff. But as we always see that happens, they're insatiable.
Mm-hmm.
These evil people get like this, and they're just insatiable.
Yep.
And he eventually developed this thing called DOS. So he had a women's group and a men's group inside the group, and they were basically just more training he could sell these people. But he created DOS, and it was said that he wasn't in charge of DOS. It was ran by the group. Matter of fact, the head of DOS was Allison Mack, famous actress who was involved in this from Smallville. But the truth was that he was secretly the head of DOS, and we'll go in that more in the social stuff. But to finish up on the timeline here, in 2017, this is when it really hit the fan.
Yeah.
Sarah Edmondson. She is kind of known as like the champion of those who took down. There was a lot of people who worked take down NXIVM, but she really just, whew. She was a small time actress when she got involved because somebody else in the industry was involved in NXIVM and she admired them so much. And she really just blew up. She was super good at this MLM thing. She recruited hundreds and hundreds of people into the group. She sold a lot of stuff. Now, when I say recruiting the group, this again, kind of like Scientology. There are those who became the inner circle, and those are the ones that were sleeping with Keith and da-da-da.
Right.
By the way, she never did. She was never one of his lovers, and she was somewhat propositioned, but it never went completely all the way, mainly because she lived so far away in Vancouver. True. But she made him money, like crazy. She worked for years for free. And then eventually she got into the commission. See, this isn't like sell a thing of mascara and you make $2. No. Yeah. You got to sell a whole bunch before you're even eligible to start making money in NXIVM.
Right.
And she actually went so far as opening a whole NXIVM office for doing trainings and stuff in Vancouver, where she's from.
So that she could sell more.
Yes. Well, that's how she built it and built it. Yep. Her office became bigger than the office in California or in Washington, Seattle. Bigger than the office that was in Seattle. Originally, she was selling these courses, and the people would have to drive from Vancouver to Seattle to go take the courses. But she was selling so much, she opened her own office. She financed all that out of her own pocketbook. She had more and more success in her acting career, by the way. She's not Julia Roberts, but she is an actress who's been in several things at this point. She is what you would call a successful actress. But that wasn't what she considered her main job. Her main job was working NXIVM.
Yep.
She was a coach, and she ran the whole office there in Vancouver. Had people working for her and all this. Well, it went really well, and she was making good money for a while. And then it started to slump a little bit, and she was approached to be a part of DOS.
Yep.
DOS, which I were never really told exactly what it stands for, I don't think.
Yeah, it's Latin. It's Dominus something. I have a note here somewhere, but I can't find it. Yeah, we'll talk about it in the teachings or the social episodes. It is.
Okay.
It's out there.
It was promised to be a secret women's group to help women be more powerful. So one of the things that he taught was to teach women how to be more powerful and more successful. And she was really very pro-woman. I don't know that she's a feminist per se, but she's pro-woman, and I'm going to help, women. But one thing Keith Raniere taught was that women were very flawed and had a lot of problems. And he basically always kept them with trying to work on their problem. Just like Scientology, anytime you complained about something, they turn it back to you.
Yep.
Well, what do you make that mean? But what do you make that mean?
Right.
Again, just like in Scientology, anytime you have a complaint or a problem about something, it's on you, not on somebody else or any outside thing.
Yep.
So while she had been in this, thing of success, and she'd been successful, but she was having some slump, and they invited her to be in DOS. Her best friend, who was Lauren Salzman, who was Nancy Salzman's daughter.
Yep.
Who was her boss in NXIVM, invited her into this group. But in this group, they had this master-slave relationship. She had to call Lauren master, and she was the slave. She was required, again, MLM, to recruit her own slaves. She was supposed to get at least 6 slaves. She only got 3. They were required to do these drills, and we'll go over that stuff in the social stuff. It was quite weird.
Yeah.
And it was meant to get the followers to obey more and more. Well, at one point, Lauren told her, well, part of this is that you need to get a little tattoo. It's going to be dime size. It'll be very cute. She's like, I don't do tattoos. I don't put anything on my body, She's like, well, if you're serious about this, you're going to do this. And she'd given collateral. This was part of NXIVM's thing too. As you took more and more classes in NXIVM, you learned about the idea of giving collateral. So, if I come to you and I say, hey, Brian, I'm going to quit smoking.
Right.
And I need you to hold me accountable. Well, we can just be friends and you can hold me accountable and call me out when I'm, start smoking. But Keith Raniere taught, no, take it to another level. I say, Brian, I need you to hold me accountable. So you say, okay, Matt, I need you to sign your house over to me.
Right.
If I catch you smoking, I'm taking your house.
Yep. And it, while yes, a house would be a big deal, a lot of it was blackmail materials.
Well, what she was asked for collateral, so she would be servient to this DOS thing, which was supposed to make her more successful, was nude photos.
Yep.
Very specifically posed nude photos, so that it was very clear who it was.
Mm-hmm.
One thing she had to give for collateral was Lauren held the phone so it looked like she was secretly recording, although they both knew they were recording, while she said bad things about her husband, said her husband beat her and stuff, which she claims never actually happened.
Right.
She said bad things about her father and her mother and her brothers and siblings and things.
Mm-hmm.
So that you could be used for blackmail. But also, one of the things that she never did end up doing, but was required to do, was to sign over her house.
Yep. Was
to quit clean the house over, so if something ever happened, Lauren could go file a thing and just take her house from her. Then the branding happened.
Yeah.
So we talked about a tattoo.
Yeah, but they took it so much further.
Yeah. So basically, they went to Alice and Mac's house, did this whole ceremony where all the women are naked, and they branded them really close to their private parts. And it wasn't even just a brand like a cattle brand. They actually used a dermatologist thing where they cauterized the skin.
Right.
And it's interesting because I recently actually experienced one of these things. I would have not really had anything to think about when I heard this if I had not gone to the dermatologist recently and had something removed off my head. Now, in my case, they used a needle, which did hurt, and put several shots in my head so that when they cauterized and cut that thing off, they shaved off my mole or whatever, it didn't hurt, but I could smell it.
Oof.
But their problem wasn't just the smell, although they were wearing masks because of the smell, because I think there were several women branded at one time. But it hurt. They had to physically hold the woman down. Several of them had to hold the other woman down. And Sarah was a leader in this organization. She was one of the top people. So she was told, you've got to be an example.
Mm-hmm.
This didn't happen to her, but she later found out, and it was going to happen to her eventually. Several other people in DOS were eventually told, to make it to the next level, you got to go have a sex with Keith.
Right.
Which is funny because even though all these women were sleeping with Keith, the official teachings taught that Keith was celibate. Were they a recantant? What do they call a priest?
Yeah, celibate would be.
Yeah, but they use an R word. But basically, he didn't have sex with anybody. That Keith he was above all that. The official teachings taught that, yet a lot of the people in the leadership, almost everybody in leadership, was sleeping with Keith. And knew about it, and knew about the others mostly.
Yeah.
So it didn't happen to her that she was required to, but a lot of the women in DOS were. She had actually brought in 3 slaves of her own and was doing the same things to them. They had not yet been branded. And basically, she blew the lid on the whole thing. Mm-hmm. After she came back from that, she ended up talking. She realized that the brand that was put on her was not just some symbol. It was actually Keith Raniere's initials.
Right.
And Allison Mack's initials. It's a KR and AM. Remember, Allison Mack was actually the head of the DOS? Mm-hmm. She'd found out that her friend who had brought her into this was one of Keith's lovers, and that he'd been promising her a baby for years, but refused to have a baby with her. And she just blew the lid off everything. She started calling everybody she knows. All that force she used to recruit people, she used to unrecruit people.
Right.
She shut down the center. She called everybody she could. She tried to do it real slowly at first, but then she just couldn't. And it just blew off. And y'all can find her story all over the internet. She wrote a book about it. There's a series on HBO called The Vow that talks about all this and has her story in particular. There's a podcast she did before all that. And she runs a podcast now called A Little Bit Culty, where she talks about other cults and things with her husband, Nippy. And yes, that's his name. We'll talk about them more in the things. That's just his fun name there. Nippy was very involved in NXIVM. She met him in NXIVM. and he was a leader in the men's group. Had nothing to do with this other part, but once he found out this stuff was happening, he threw a fit. He comes across as a very brutish man.
Right. So she blows the lid off 2018. Where does that lead?
So she's telling everybody about this.
Mm-hmm.
She still can't get anybody anybody involved. She gets a little media attention, and finally, the FBI starts to investigate. Like, they just don't want to listen, don't want to pay attention. Right. They don't have the resources. Finally, they start to investigate. Once they start investigating, bam, 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 things went quick.
Yep.
All of a sudden, they're arresting all kinds of people. Okay? They arrested Keith Raniere.
Mm-hmm.
They arrested Nancy Salzman. They arrested Lauren Salzman. They arrested Allison Mack. They arrested Claire Bronfman,
mm-hmm.
who is one of the people who financed the thing.
Yep.
One of his also lovers and one of the leaders, I believe she was the CFO, and Kathy Russell, the bookkeeper.
Yeah. So they
just went through and arrested all kinds of people.
Yep. Yeah, they hit them hard and fast. And then in 2019, the trial began, and all the women pled guilty, and Keith didn't.
Yes, because he still thought he could work his way out of it. He hired a high-priced lawyer, and things fell apart very, very quickly for him. And that's when that documentary came out we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Keith ended up being sentenced to 120 years in prison for sex trafficking, forced labor, and racketeering. He was 60 years old, and he got 120 years in prison. Nancy Salzman got 42 months in prison. Lauren Salzman ended with no jail time at all. She gave very detailed testimony. While a lot of everybody else talked and pled guilty to their roles, she's the only one who gave direct incriminating testimony about Doss.
Okay.
Doss is really what did him in.
Yeah.
NXIVM itself wasn't illegal per se. It was Doss that really did him in. Allison Mack, the movie star, television star, got 36 months in prison. She just got out like last week, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Claire Bronfman got 81 months, the billionaire.
Yep.
Kathy Russell got 24 months, and all the assets of the company were seized. Some of the assets from some of the defendants were seized too. Nancy Salzman had a grand piano seized. And there were heavy fines. Keith was also fined like $1.75 million.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, when you've got all these people giving you money left and right,
nothing.
It's probably nothing. But
yeah. And that's pretty much the end of it. There are still some people who believe in some of the things from NXIVM. There's not really a NXIVM group that exists anymore. Mm-mm. But honestly, I think some of the things they taught are so generic.
Right.
Some of that's still taught.
It's still out there.
And
for sure.
As a Christian, I want to say those things are wrong, but they aren't necessarily illegal.
Right.
And aren't necessarily a cult. Some of the teachings they did.
Right.
But this definitely crossed over into that,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
For sure. So that's pretty much the history of NXIVM right there, y'all.
Cool. So, Matt, next time we're going to break into some of the teachings. I'm sure that'll be a shorter episode than most of ours, because a lot of the teachings were so watered down and basic. It really all boiled down to the social issues for them, the manipulation and the sex cult. So,
but the teachings set them up for that, like a lot of things. So that's why it's important and why we're going to go over them, because it sets them up for those for the social issues to happen.
Yep. Awesome. So we'll see y'all next week.